If one nutrient is quietly deciding whether your body breaks down in 10 years, why are we still obsessing over the thing with the biggest marketing budget? Because that might be the most expensive illusion in modern health, and the answer is hiding in plain sight. What if the real crisis isn't what everyone is taking more of, but what almost nobody is getting enough of? Let's get into it. He basically called protein supplements marketing in a shaker bottle. That is such an evil sentence, and I love it. Because everyone acts like protein is the holy grail now. If it says protein, people behave like it can pay rent. But the thing he said that hit hardest was, fiber is the actual crisis. That part feels annoyingly plausible. 1 in 20 people getting enough fiber is insane, right? And somehow nobody is selling fiber with the same loud voice. Nobody has built a six-pack commercial around broccoli. That's because broccoli doesn't come with a treadmill soundtrack. But his bigger point is, the modern diet is quietly loading disease. Like the scary part is it doesn't show up immediately. You're young, fit, and still planting tomorrow's problem. That is the annoying truth people hate hearing at 30. Everyone wants health advice that starts working by Monday. He was basically saying chronic disease starts as a slow negotiation, and nutrition decides which side of the deal you get. The economic part was wild too, like 60 billion pounds a year. So it's not just wellness, it's productivity, healthcare, the whole country. Turns out salads are infrastructure. Bro, that's a terrible slogan, but also weirdly correct. I liked how he separated weight loss from actual long-term health. Because people keep pretending body size is the whole story. And then they go, I work out so I can eat like a raccoon. That is exactly the energy in every gym parking lot. The protein thing, though, that really pokes a hole in gym culture. He said most people already get enough protein from normal food. Nearly twice as much as they need is a brutal number. That means the supplement aisle is basically powered by anxiety. And gym influencers in sleeveless hoodies. Plus a lot of words like lean, shredded, recovery, and optimize. He kept saying protein is fine, just not magical, which is such a sane answer nobody markets. I think people confuse essential with unlimited. And then he dropped the part about excess protein becoming sugar and fat. That should be on every shaker bottle in giant letters. Imagine the legal department trying to survive that. It changes the vibe from fuel to just another calorie source. The only real exceptions were elderly people and some edge cases. Which makes sense, because the loudest protein buyers are not the elderly. They are not doing influencer thirst traps with dumbbells. The fiber section felt like the actual center of gravity, because fiber is basically food for the microbes, not for us directly. Which is funny because your gut has a whole population living rent-free, and apparently they're very picky tenants. He made it sound like diversity of plants is the real flex. 30 plants a week sounds impossible until he starts counting nuts and seeds. That's such a sneaky little hack. The diversity jar thing is actually genius. You just keep tossing in different nuts and seeds all week. And suddenly, you're not just chasing protein, you're feeding the system. It also sounds way more realistic than perfect meal planning. Nobody is consistently living the broccoli monk lifestyle. The fermented food part was where it got weirdly fun. He was basically making a fridge trash science project. Cabbage scraps, salt, water, and suddenly you're a biohacker. That is the most accidental genius thing in the whole conversation. And the point is, fermentation makes food more available and more alive. Plus, it creates a bunch of probiotic organisms at once. He said a capsule gives you maybe 2 or 3 microbes, while fermented food can give you dozens, which is the kind of comparison that makes supplements look tiny, like bringing a pocket knife to a kitchen. I also liked that he explained the weird food labels as marketing theater. 0 fat and 0 sugar sounds healthy until you remember taste exists. And if they had to strip out fat, they usually replace it with processing. So the health halo is doing a lot of unpaid acting. The packaging is the main product at that point. The Activia example was hilarious because the slogan sounded almost too polished. When the label starts whispering about your happiness, I get suspicious. But he was fair because some probiotic angle can still exist underneath the nonsense, just not when it's dressed up with a mountain of claims. This whole episode felt like learning to distrust shiny nutrition language and trust boring food more than sexy food. The boring foods are always the villains until they become medicine. The microbiome part is where it gets genuinely fascinating, though. He made it sound like gut health affects immunity, mood, and infections. That's a ridiculous amount of overlap for something most people ignore. And the idea that your microbes are already there waiting is kind of cool. Like tiny roommates waiting for groceries. That is exactly what it is, honestly. I think the strongest argument is this isn't about obsession, it's about range. More plant types, more fiber, more fermented food, less gimmick. And maybe less pretending powders are a personality. That should be printed on every gym mirror. If anything, it makes health look less dramatic and more daily. Just small choices, repeated, doing weird invisible work for years. Which is boring, but that's usually where the real answer hides. All right, I'm with you on this one. The fiber panic is real. And next time I see a protein bar screaming at me, I'm judging it harder. Episode 2 better get into what else the supermarket has been lying about. Because if protein was the decoy, I want the full list of suspects. Next up, we're tearing into the other so-called healthy foods in the aisle. Protein got marketed like it was the final boss of health. Meanwhile, fiber is sitting there like the unpaid intern doing all the work. And that's the weird part because protein is not actually scarce for most people. It feels scarce only because every packet is screaming at you. If a cereal bar has to brag that hard, I start trusting it less. That's my new rule now, honestly. The whole ad protein obsession sounds like a very profitable anxiety. And the actual crisis is people barely getting enough fiber. 1 in 20? That number is almost offensive. Like, congratulations, society, we failed vegetables again. What I found strong was the idea that diet problems become society problems. Not just weight, but cancer, diabetes, heart disease, even mental health. That part hits harder than a Gym Bro protein ad. Because then it is not just personal choice, it is economic drag too. $60 billion a year is not a lifestyle issue anymore. That is a national bill for bad lunch decisions. The invisible disease point is also wild, though. You can look fit and still be building future problems quietly. That is the scary genius of it. Because you do not feel the damage while you still feel young. Your abs can lie to you, basically. Abs are apparently terrible financial advisors. And protein supplements are the perfect trap because they feel obviously virtuous. You drink one after the gym and feel like you have solved health. But if most people are already around a gram per kilo, what are we even doing? Just making expensive sugar-adjacent drinks, apparently. And then acting like it is ancient wisdom. The body cannot store protein as protein, which is the big misunderstanding. So the extra just gets broken down and repurposed. Nature said no protein savings account for you. That is such a brutal sentence for supplement companies. And I liked that he was not anti-protein, just anti-hysteria. Elderly people, very sick people, some vegetarians, bodybuilders cutting weight. Fine, sure. But normal people eating normal food do not need a powder worship routine. Powder worship is exactly what it is sometimes. But the fiber argument is way more interesting because it is not flashy. It is literally just plants, nuts, seeds, and variety. That diversity jar idea is actually brilliant. You add a few nuts and seeds and suddenly you have a huge microbiome hack. Health through kitchen laziness, my favorite kind. And the whole 30 plants thing sounds insane until you break it into little cheats. A salad topper, a seed mix, a fruit, a legume, a spice blend, it adds up fast. Which means the real enemy is not complexity, it is monotony. Same breakfast, same lunch, same sad little routine. The microbiome probably hates meal prep bros. Like, bro, again with the chicken and rice? The microbial diversity point makes sense because different foods feed different microbes. So you are not just eating plants, you are feeding an ecosystem. That is the part that feels bigger than dieting. It turns food from self-control into stewardship. And if the gut influences immunity and maybe mood, then it gets even more interesting. Still, I can hear people saying this sounds too neat. Fair, but the mechanism is not magic, it is microbes, fermentation, and fiber. Which brings me to the fermentation stuff because that was weirdly addictive. Taking leftover vegetables and turning them into something useful is ridiculously satisfying. Very science fair meets grandma's kitchen. The best part is that fermentation is basically controlled microbial work. You give the right salt, the right environment, and the good microbes take over. It is like hiring a tiny hostile takeover team. And somehow the result tastes better than the original food. I also liked that it is about reducing waste, not just boosting health. The leftovers in the fridge become a probiotic food instead of trash. That feels almost embarrassingly simple, which is probably why it works better than the complicated stuff. And the bubbles are basically proof that the microbes are alive and working. That part is cool because you can literally watch the food transform. The supermarket label scam detector part was also ruthless. Zero fat, zero sugar, vitamin this, immune that. It all sounds healthy until you look closer. A lot of those claims are just legal decoration. Very expensive decoration. The low-fat thing especially sounded backward because it can make people overeat. So the food gets more processed to imitate satisfaction it already removed. That is such a dumb loop. Strip the fat, add the weirdness, then sell it as a favor. And the probiotic branding is funny because the real product is often mostly marketing. 1 or 2 strains in a capsule versus a fermented food with way more variety. That is the kind of comparison that changes how you shop instantly. Milk and microbes start sounding better than 15-ingredient theater. 15-ingredient theater is a great phrase. I also thought the country comparison was revealing. Places with more fermented foods and more diverse plant intake seem to delay chronic disease. So this is not about trendy wellness, it is about patterns at population scale, which is way less sexy and way more convincing. And the gut health aisle starts looking suspiciously like a confidence trick. Some of it might still be useful, but the packaging is doing the heavy lifting. The logo is lifting weights, not the yogurt. That should be on a t-shirt. What I keep coming back to is how unsexy the actual advice is. Eat more plants, eat more variety, stop obsessing over powders. It is almost annoyingly simple. But simple does not mean easy, because habits and marketing are powerful. And we are all basically trained to chase the loudest health message, which is usually protein, low fat, or some shiny label. Never maybe eat some lentils and chill. That should honestly be the slogan. Eat lentils and chill would save a lot of money. I think the bigger takeaway is that health is less about hacks and more about inputs over time. Tiny decisions repeated, becoming either resilience or disease. That is not dramatic, but it is true. And honestly, that makes me trust the boring answer more than the flashy one. Because flashy answers usually need a sales team behind them. The boring answer just needs a kitchen. All right, we have definitely been seduced by the fiber side of the story. But I want to tear apart the rest of the supermarket health aisle next. Because if protein was the decoy, the other labels are probably full of nonsense too. Episode 2 is going to be a massacre. We are going to open the rest of the healthy-looking traps and see what survives. And maybe by then I will have accepted that my fridge needs more plants and fewer excuses. Protein got sold to us like it's a personality trait. People act like a scoop equals discipline. And meanwhile, fiber is over there begging for attention. The quiet kid is the one keeping everybody alive. That's the part that annoys me most, honestly. The real health crisis is boring enough to ignore. Nobody's selling a sexy ad for beans, but the numbers on fiber are insane when you hear them. 1 in 20 people actually getting enough is wild. That means most people are just winging it badly. And the weirdest part is, you do not need a miracle. You need a handful of nuts and basic respect for plants. That's the anti-supplement manifesto right there. What I keep coming back to is the invisible damage idea. Like you feel fine, so you assume you're fine? But the disease is apparently doing push-ups in the background. That is genuinely creepy if you think about it. Especially if you're young and training all the time. Because fitness can become this giant moral cover. You do cardio and suddenly think ketchup is a food group. Bro, I have absolutely met that guy. And then you hear the long game argument and it hits harder. Like you're not just eating for today's mirror. You're basically writing future you a receipt. That is the sentence that changes people, I think. Because if the bill comes in 10 or 20 years, that's late. And society pays too, which is the crazy part. It's not just your own body, it's the whole system. A bad lunch can become a public expense. That's the least romantic way to describe dinner. But it's also kind of true, which is annoying. The mental health link is the part people skip too fast. Because everyone wants food to be only about abs. But mood, energy, and inflammation are part of the same mess. The body is not organized by marketing categories. If only the supermarket understood that. The protein thing still gets me, though. Because we were all trained to fear not enough protein. But apparently most people are already way above the line. Nearly twice what they need is a brutal fact. So the emergency muscle rescue mission was fake. The gym bros are going to hate that sentence. And the part about excess turning into sugar and fat is nasty. People think protein is this sacred, clean nutrient. But the body is still a chemistry lab, not a monastery. So the real question is, who actually needs the supplements? Old people not eating enough, sick people, some vegans, bodybuilders. Basically not the guy buying protein granola because he has goals. Exactly, that guy is just paying rent to marketing. And the funniest thing is normal food already covers most of it. Pasta has protein, grains have protein, everything's sneaking it in. So the actual missing piece is fiber, not another scoop. That flip is what feels so anti-instinct. Because fiber doesn't feel like a performance nutrient. It does not come with a dramatic shaker bottle. It really does not. But it's basically feeding the ecosystem that feeds you back. And that ecosystem seems to care about variety more than volume. Which is why 30 plants a week sounds insane at first. 30 plants sounds like a punishment from a nutrition cult. But then the diversity jar makes it feel stupidly doable. 10 plants from nuts and seeds alone is almost cheating. And that's what I like because it is practical. People need hacks, not lectures. The irony is nuts and seeds also give you protein. So fiber quietly wins twice while protein keeps posing. That's a savage way to put it. The fermentation thing is even cooler because it's just the same idea intensified. Like letting microbes do the cooking for you. And the fact that it's literally fridge scraps is hilarious. Your trash becomes your gut health plan. That's a beautiful insult to wasteful eating. The salt, the squashing, the no oxygen part is kind of elegant. It sounds like science, but it also sounds ancient. That's probably why it works so well. And the idea that the food gets pre-digested is huge. You're not just eating microbes, you're eating their work. That's such a cleaner pitch than a capsule. The capsule has all the charisma of office medicine. Meanwhile, kimchi is out here doing the most. And apparently the Korean and Japanese diets prove the point. More fermented food, longer lives, fewer chronic problems. Which is annoying because the answer is, again, not glamorous. It's just food culture that didn't get wrecked by convenience. The supermarket aisle is where the scam detector really matters. Because the labels are all trying to sound like medicine. 0 sugar, 0 fat, rich in vitamins, great for immunity. That is basically a costume, not a food. A health costume is exactly right. And the funny part is 0 fat often means more processing, which usually means more starch, more sugar, more weirdness. They remove the thing that makes food satisfying, then fake it. And that can push people into overeating without realizing it. So the healthy-looking snack can make you eat more later. The label lies with a clean haircut. That's a great line. The probiotic yogurt thing is even messier, though, because a tiny bit of live culture does not cancel the rest. If it's loaded with additives, the halo gets pretty thin. One friendly microbe and a riot of junk. That's basically the vibe, yeah. What I love is how this keeps coming back to simplicity. Milk and microbes, plants and salt, variety and patience. No miracle powder hiding in a shiny tube. Just actual food behaving like food. Which is probably the most radical thing in the episode. Because the whole system profits off confusion. Protein panic sells, fiber boredom doesn't. Boring is apparently where the good science lives. That should be on the poster. I also think the invisible future health angle is the bigger mind change. Like not waiting for symptoms to become permission. You're trying to keep the machine quieter for longer. Which is much less exciting than a transformation story. But probably way more useful. So the move is less supplement worship, more plant stacking. Less label worship, more ingredient suspicion. And maybe a jar of fermented chaos in the fridge. Honestly, that sounds like a better life already. We should leave people with that simple kind of aggression. Buy less hype, feed more microbes, and stop fearing beans. That's the title of my next fake book. All right, next time we go deeper into the supermarket trap zone. Because the healthy-looking shelves have not been cleared yet. We still have a whole aisle of nonsense to execute. Episode 2 is going to be properly chaotic. The weirdest part is how protein became moral. Like if you skip a shake, society collapses. And meanwhile, fiber is sitting there like an ignored genius. That is such a perfect modern scam shape. If a label screams high protein, I trust it less now. Because the whole trick is making normal food look inadequate. That hit me hard when he said most people already get enough. We act like supplements are the foundation, when they are usually the garnish. A very expensive garnish in a plastic tub. And the body does not just politely admire extra protein, it converts it. Your shake is not going straight to your biceps, sorry. It may be going to tomorrow's regret instead. What I like is the scale of the problem is almost insulting. 1 in 20 getting enough fiber is wild. 1 in 20 is not a gap, that is a collapse. And people are arguing about whether coffee is a health food. The priorities are completely upside down. Fiber is such an unsexy word that nobody can monetize it properly, which is probably why it is the actual answer. The 30 plants a week thing sounded impossible until he broke it down. A jar of nuts and seeds and suddenly you are a third done. That is the kind of hack I respect because it is almost lazy. It is not obsession, it is design. That diversity jar is basically micro-bribery. Feed the little guys and they stop acting homeless. The pet analogy was funny but also kind of perfect. You are not empty, you are an ecosystem. And ecosystems need variety or they get fragile. The girlfriend microbiome exchange thing was unhinged, but true. Apparently romance is also a transfer protocol. Love is just shared bacteria with emotional commitment. That line is going to annoy so many people. But the important bit is the food has to keep them alive. Otherwise you are importing microbes into a wasteland. Which is kind of a terrifying sentence, honestly. The fermentation demo was the best part, though, because it made gut health feel physical instead of abstract. Salt, pressure, time, no oxygen, and suddenly food transforms. It is tiny chemistry theater in a jar. And the fact that it starts with fridge scraps is so good. That flips the whole story from consumption to creation. Also, the probiotic capsule comparison was brutal. 30 microbes versus 3 is not a contest. The capsule marketing just feels so thin after that. Fermented food is basically nature doing the work for you. And it is old wisdom dressed up like a new discovery. The supermarket label section was where it got really savage. 0 sugar, 0 fat, rich in vitamins, and immediately suspicious. If a product has to yell that hard, something is missing. Those health halos are basically costume jewelry. He was right that low fat often means more processing. And then people overeat because the food got weird. It is such a trap. Remove the thing that makes food satisfying, then patch it. Then sell the patch as wellness. The real rule seems stupidly simple. Fewer ingredients, more actual food. Milk and microbes sounded almost offensively plain, which is exactly why it is probably correct. I also liked that he tied it back to mental health. We act like diet is only about weight, but it is much bigger than that. The body, the mind, the economy, all in the same argument. 60 billion pounds a year is not a lifestyle issue. That is a national bill. And somehow the conversation still gets hijacked by powdered protein. That might be the most podcast thing ever said. If you want, I think the next layer is the supermarket sabotage angle. Because the labels are where the manipulation gets really classy. And maybe we should talk about what actually deserves shelf space. Spoiler, probably not the neon yogurt. All right, let's leave it there before we start attacking breakfast. We are definitely attacking breakfast next time. Episode 2 gets into the label lies, the fake health foods, and the shelf games.